All right. For those of you who've just joined, welcome to our Fireside chat on resilience in the face of cyber threats, strategies for Taiwan's digital strategy. For some quick housekeeping, everyone has been muted, but feel free to add questions into the chat throughout the conversation. So we're excited to answer them when we come to the end. We'll have a live Q&A session to answer those questions. Today, I'm excited to share both Joe Saunders, founder and CEO of RunSafe Security, along with Jason Hsu, visiting fellow at Hudson Institute and former legislator from Taiwan, as they dive into their insights on the critical cyber and resilience issues facing Taiwan today.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Jason. Very much look forward to the discussion today, and thank you for all the attendees. To kick it off, I'm Joe Saunders, founder and CEO of RunSafe Security. We protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. And with that said, I'm very excited about the conversation today. To kick it off, I'll just say one opening remark and turn it over to Jason. So despite all the conflicts and crises around today in the world, Taiwan remains one of the greatest challenges the next US president will face. So who better to discuss not only the issues Taiwan faces today, but also the implications for the United States policy and more specifically cyber defense strategies than a former legislator from Taiwan, Mr. Jason Hsu. So Jason, welcome.
Great to be here with you, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And so let's jump right in. Let's kick it off with the foundational question, if we may, Jason. And if you would, can you describe in your words what's at stake in the Indo-Pacific? Given wars in Ukraine and Gaza, while China is projecting more and more power, what's at stake in Taiwan, and why is Taiwan such an important issue for the next US president?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Indo-Pacific region is at the heart of global strategic competition with immense economic, security, and geopolitical stakes for both US and its allies. So it's naturally for every US president managing the dynamic in the region will be essential because of the military factors, the rise of China, and importance of Taiwan, and also the broader implications for global security, which is heightened by ongoing conflicts such as those in Ukraine and Gaza. So I'll begin by delving into what's at stake in the Indo-Pacific. First of all, it's economic powerhouse. It is arguably the world's most important economic region, including China, Japan, South Korea, and ASEAN countries, accounting over 60% of global GDP, trade, and economic growth. And the US also relies heavily on these economic ties, and maintaining stability in the region is critical. Secondly, in terms of military operation, freedom of navigation is crucial to U.S. as well as its allies for maritime routes such as South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca. So the waterways that facilitate global trade and energy supply chains were nearly 1/3 of global shipping passing through the South China Sea alone. Any disruption, particularly by a more assertive Chinese aggression, could have devastating global consequences. And lastly, geopolitical competition. Obviously, the Indo-Pacific is the epicenter of the US-China competition. China's rise, combined with its efforts to project military power and increase its influence through initiatives such as Belt and Road initiatives, has increased tensions. US sees its allies and partnerships in the region as essential for countering Chinese ambitions, especially through mechanisms such as AUKUS and the Quad. And next, let's talk about what's at stake for Taiwan. Number one, it's its strategic location. Obviously, Taiwan is located on the first island chain. It's critical geostrategic point in the region, which runs from Japan down through Philippines. It also serves as a choke point between China and the broader Pacific, which is vital for both defense and maintaining US influence in the region. Secondly, And this is very important to all the audience who are tech savvy. Taiwan is a semiconductor powerhouse. Taiwan is home to TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which produces a significant share of world's advanced semiconductors. Almost 90% of the advanced chips are made by TSMC, and overall 60% of world chips are made in Taiwan. And 30 is the US credibility and its alliance system. So Taiwan is closely watched by US allies in the region, such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia. So if the US were to fail to respond to a Taiwan contingency or defend Taiwan in the face of Chinese aggression, it could erode trust in American commitments to its allies and the perception of the US weakness could embolden China to take an even more aggressive aggressive activities. And also this could provoke or encourage other adversaries, such as Russia, to press forward with their own expansionist ambitions. I'll stop here and over to you, Joe.
Yeah, and we'll pick up more of those discussions as we go forward, but that's a great foundation and certainly sets the stage for why Taiwan and the region is so strategic to the U.S. interest, but to the global economy in general, and to the importance of all the alliances. And with that said, we might think that this is, competition that ultimately could lead to military conflict on a kinetic, more traditional warfare set, but maybe it's in a more non-traditional cyber warfare scene. So with
Yeah.
that as a backdrop, just last week, China deployed hundreds of warplanes as a warning to Taiwan.
Mhm.
It was simulating the sealing off of seaports, to your point, on trade routes as a response to Taiwan celebrating its national day and some comments made by the Taiwanese president. So with that said, are the China's military exercises a warning or is it an escalation? And should we be concerned about the kinetic effects of traditional warfare only, or should we also be considering the cyber effects and non-traditional warfare elements?
Yeah. In answering this question, I would go back to the previous question with the comparison of today's Ukraine, tomorrow's Taiwan. Obviously, the wars in Ukraine demonstrate the far-reaching consequences of territorial disputes and regional stability. The stakes are similarly high for Taiwan, but with even greater global implications if China were to take control of Taiwan. Number one, it would mark the first time in modern history that a global superpower annexes a prosperous democracy. And secondly, the US-China rivalry would likely to be thrown into a direct military conflict. The estimated cost of such a conflict is 3 trillion just by China imposing a blockade on Taiwan globally. And thirdly, a broader precedent could be set for authoritarian states to challenge the post-World War II order, encouraging acts of aggression elsewhere in Asia and potentially in Europe, where Russia's action in Ukraine could intensify. So given the above implications, let's look at what China's military exercise mean to the current Indo-Pacific region, and is it a warning or is it an escalation as we've seen more and more Chinese aggression in the region? China frequently uses military exercise as a sign of signaling. So deploying a large number of warplanes or simulating a blockade is a direct response to what China perceives as a provocative action by Taiwan, meaning, if Taiwan declare independence or the rhetoric is leaning towards independence. Whether or not it might be an escalation, it depended on how we understand and interpret the scale and complexity of these exercises. These exercises suggest the level of escalation when frequent incursions into Taiwan Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, and the focus of its tactics, such as blockade, indicate that Chinese is preparing for a more aggressive contingencies. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an escalation, but it is a signaling that Chinese is making preparations for such an escalation. And this is not just posturing. It reflects that real military readiness to carry out such an operation that could be used in actual conflict. So should we be concerned about the kinetic effects of the traditional warfare? Yes, but traditional warfare is just one dimension of the threat that China is capable of. While kinetic actions like blockade, airstrikes, and amphibious assaults are most visible, but equally, non-kinetic warfare are even more present and even more threatening. I'll use the cyber attacks, for example. Chinese constantly make a massive surveillance on Taiwan's public portal, try to disrupt Taiwan's critical infrastructure, power grids, water system, telecommunication, undersea cable, as well as targeting our military systems, including radar, missile defense. And then there's more to it. There's also psychological warfare. CCP has been deploying disinformation campaign, manipulating public opinion, and psychological operations aimed at sowing confusions and weakening our solidarity and morale. And this type of information warfare, China has invested heavily in disinformation campaign designed to undermine our political cohesion and also trust of our citizens. They have over 6,000 cyber troopers actually located in Shanghai, and they employ tens of thousands of workers, even within Taiwan, through social media manipulation, deepfakes, and fake news to be used to weaken our resolve before or during a conflict. And lastly, this is more than just one-dimensional. There's also the component of economic warfare. China uses its economic leverage by restricting trade, imposing sanctions, restricting imports or tourism, or even disrupting shipping lanes that we depend on for energy imports and exports of our agricultural produce. So a blockade would have served economic effects, forcing Taiwan to submit without a shot being fired. And what you have seen, and also Joe has mentioned this, is more and more incidents of so-called gray zone tactics, military coercion short of war, to be more exact. So this include more frequent incursion into our air defense zone, or to exhaust our military patrol or resources and normalize their presence of force in the region or in the area, slowly eroding our defense posture without open conflict. And also the political warfare is ongoing by basically influencing our elections, and also seek to coerce other nations into isolating Taiwan diplomatically. I'll stop here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously it's multifaceted set of issues to balance, and it includes traditional warfare, non-traditional warfare. And just to sort of emphasize the points on the cyber dimension, then there are national security implications of the gray zone tactics, of the cyber tactics that are employed. So if you think about it, it's safe to say that nation state cyber operations can, in fact, as you said, undermine cohesion and ultimately undermine the resilience of a country, which gets to the non-traditional form of warfare that we're talking about. But also it's a form of statecraft to seek its objectives. And so I see it on really two fronts, and they both get to the ways to undermine a country's confidence in its government. And one in particular, of course, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. And if you think about that, the notion of that, what if you have no power? What if comms go down, communications? What if the money system does not work? All of those things would help, someone understand why they might be losing confidence in their own government if those basic services and those things we take for granted are not available. And that's true in Taiwan. That could also be true in other parts of the world. It could be true in Japan. It could be true in the United States as well. We rely on these services, and we saw a little bit of this in Ukraine, where Ukraine helped restore some of those basic services. But cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in general, that's one dimension of the cyber warfare. And you brought up the other one, the disinformation. What if a country becomes divided over the issues? What if the truth is, not agreed to, and the belief in government, the belief is that the government's not doing a good job? Though both those items, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure and disinformation campaigns, if you add those two things together, you get to the heart of what can undermine resilience in general, even before any kinetic effects are taken. And so attacks on critical infrastructure may not be kinetic attacks, but they are major threats to the government, society, institutions, norms, and beliefs. And with that in mind, you and I have talked in the past, Jason, about the millions of cyber attacks that occur daily in Taiwan. And from your perspective, I know you listed a bunch of sectors earlier. What do you think are the most pressing sectors that Taiwan must defend from a cyber sphere as you think about its own resilience and your perspective there, and even potentially how the US could help?
Yeah, so number is 30 million attacks by day. So it might sound astronomical and sort of this massive number to grapple with, although few of those attacks penetrated the system. But one can tell that China is constantly taking a surveillance on our vulnerabilities and trying to find loopholes to really get to our critical infrastructure or our data. And most recently, they've tried to hack into our public health data system. And imagine if your ministers or your president's health record were in the hands of the enemy. They could know that what type of doctors that your president goes to and what kind of medication or treatment, and then they could potentially undermine your president, and by basically doing a lot of operations. So there's that, and more importantly, these attacks are not just targeted on government portals or government infrastructure. They are targeted on surveillance sector and as well as critical infrastructure as well. I would say probably the most pronounced vulnerability is our energy sector. Our energy sector is heavily dependent on imports. We rely on 90% of the imports of LNG gas, liquid natural gas. So we have a very limited energy reserves. So our electricity grid, power plants, and the fuel transportation, our distribution systems that are highly susceptible to cyber attacks. So once China is able to cut off our energy transmission, then the island would be plunged into a paralysis. And that would be a huge concern for global technology supply chain, semiconductor chips, and then etc. And a very successful cyber attacks on energy grid will look like this. It's going to cause widespread blackouts, disrupting military command and control communications, public services, and it's going to shock the society, and the stock market will plummet. And the next day, it will force our political leaders to negotiate with CCP. And energy facilities could be targeted by malware or DDoS attacks, denial of service, or even physical sabotage through cyber systems. For example, they have been using fishing boats to sail around some of the undersea cable and then lay the anchor onto those cables and damaging those cables. And this caused the disruption of the shipping lanes and the communication. Secondly, Taiwan's communication infrastructure is also vital to civilian and military operations. So this includes telecom, mobile network, and internet services. So imagine if you were to blockade Taiwan, you wanted to starve the island, its people, and you want to cut off the communication so that you can talk to we can talk to outside, we can seek help, and U.S. Support would have no way to locate where the conflict is happening, and we won't be able to contact our allies. So this disruptive communication system would isolate our island and also government and military from public and allies. And this would also provoke a anxiety and a fear within society. And so this is again another thing that is going to be highly vital, and also China could easily do, but without causing too much attention. And lastly, I want to talk about undersea cable, basically submarine internet cables. So China could use its own submarines, unmanned underwater vehicles, or so-called UUVs, or cyber attacks on subsea communication cables to sabotage or intercept critical data. And this would impact financial transactions, trade, and intelligence sharing with all allies. So imagine all the semiconductor data was transmitted by those undersea cables, and that would be stolen or hijacked or hostage by CCP. So this type of things are ongoing, and it's on a scale that's in a gray zone, and it's hard to detect. You can't really arrest a fishing boat conducting a fishing expedition, but then actually doing the military operation, which requires a lot of inspection and also manpower. So that's answering your question there, Joe.
Yeah, it's a very comprehensive answer, and certainly I wanted to pick up on one of those elements, which was, you talked about the communications, and I include in the communications certainly access to systems and data. And if we think about some of the lessons from Ukraine, one of the first things that Ukraine had done was ensure that their systems were migrated to the cloud and not vulnerable to, facilities being attacked in country, but all the data, the government services data, the systems are still maintained and available because they're not physically, an easy target, if you will. And so migrating to the cloud is one option that helps facilitate that. And just to complete that thought on Ukraine, I'll take it a step further. So they moved systems to the cloud. They then ensured that basic government services were operational, so you could continue to get your licenses, prove your identity, similar things like that. And then also they work to bolster the financial system and payments and the movement of money. And, in addition to energy and other topics, those were some of the things that Ukraine did, to help make the country itself resilient despite it going into traditional war. given the Russian invasion. So with that, I think the importance of understanding the cyber threats then are in fact, important. And you've done a good job laying out the full scope of those. And, if I thought about the most critical steps Taiwan and other nations should take to improve cyber resilience at a national level, certainly moving all the data to the cloud, like I said, Ukraine had done. And as kind of highlighting what you said about communications, I think that goes without say. But let's be realistic. We know that to counter critical infrastructure attacks, we really have to counter things that China has already done. They've done it in the US in critical infrastructure, in Japan, and most likely in Taiwan. They've pre-positioned payloads that target weaknesses in infrastructure, especially as you highlighted, the case for making energy and communications resilient. And so oftentimes those are things that can be filled with software memory protection in general. But that is a second thing. So if I would say, some ideas that Taiwan may want to implement and the US may want to help with is moving all that technology and data into the cloud and make sure it's resilient that way, protecting critical infrastructure from cyber attacks when China's already pre-positioned to implement a payload, and then make sure the basic government services are operating, which obviously is a great challenge given the complexity of how to maintain resilience in Taiwan, and then to counter the disinformation. So those are the four things. You might have some others to add to it. Certainly, I know you have a lot more specifics, and you were, in part helpful to create the cybersecurity legislation when you were a legislator. Anything else you want to add to that list that you think Taiwan needs to prepare before we start talking about what the U.S., policy implications might be?
Yeah, I think most important is to keep the island functional or keep the island operating when a conflict takes place. We need to get through a critical period of 7 to 10 days. And I imagine if in any sort of conflict or contingency, there would be a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety within our society. So how do we develop the nation and our people to be resilient, both mentally and as well as in preparation? This means the stockpiling food and water and potentially build out energy storage facilities within the island. And also, right now, our major energy reliance is import of the natural gas. Could we start using the small nuclear reactors that can be basically self-generating and as well as providing stable energy sources continuously? I think that's one of the very important things. Excuse me. And secondly, is probably making sure that healthcare and health services and also medical operations are continued during the time of a crisis. And it's very important that these emergency services are activated precisely and to provide the backbone for the society to deal with. So it's more than just, maintaining your servers and grid and migrating your data. It actually a part of it is psychological. You need to prepare your people to also have a robust cyber defense mentality as well. Part of this attack is going to be on your mind more than on your physical objects or your road or your computers. It would be an attack on your mind and your head as well, to try to mess up your head so that you can surrender and succumb to authoritarian regimes.
Very good. Good point. And with that in mind, so we've talked about the importance, the threat, some of the considerations, both cyber-wise and then more broadly psychologically, and ensuring the population remains resilient. What are some U.S. government strategies that the U.S. could pursue directly with Taiwan, either in cyber defense or even more broadly? But what kind of ideas do you have for how the U.S. and Taiwan should work on some of the cyber related issues or more broadly?
Yeah, here's what I would lay out for a U.S.-Taiwan joint collaborations. Number one is to enhance cybersecurity cooperation and information sharing. We haven't had any formal channels for real-time information sharing on cyber threats, malware signatures, and attack factors. And this is critically important that we are able to share threat intelligence, and either through CESA or NICST, our National Information and Communication Security Task Force. And also, US and Taiwan need to engage more in the cyber red teams and also joint exercises. And this type of exercise can be in explicit, so that China would not have a chance to penetrate. And secondly, it's the capacity building for our own cyber workforce. US can help Taiwan to train cybersecurity task force by offering training programs and also skill professionals in areas such as incident response or digital forensics or threat hunting. So this type of exchange programs with cyber experts can be done with NSA, National Security Agency, or DHS, or Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security. And thirdly, as I have alluded earlier, to strengthen Taiwan's critical infrastructure, cyber defenses are very important. US and Taiwan can establish a joint critical infrastructure resilience program by auditing and strengthening the cybersecurity of the critical infrastructure, including energy grid, telecom, financial services, healthcare, or defense. So this could include US deploying cyber experts to assess vulnerabilities and also help Taiwan to develop a robust mechanism. And lastly, cyberspace is its own warfare. So you have kinetic warfare, the land, air, and sea, and you have amphibious and others. But the cyberspace warfare should be treated as a new defense a priority. So could Taiwan and US establish a cybersecurity defense pact? And this could allow a cyber defense agreement, so similar to an alliances with our regional partners, such as Japan and Korea, to share cyber intelligence, and then also co-develop strategies to address these things. And lastly is joint response to the crisis scenarios. Now, we've talked about several scenarios, either as a signal or warning or a potential escalation. So US and Taiwan should establish a joint protocol, and basically by agreeing on how to engage or what to engage and disengage. And an event of a severe cyber attack on critical infrastructure, this type of collaboration will include coordinated incident management and recovery process and public communication messaging. As I have shared, that sometimes it's by attacking the mind of your civilians to break down your social cohesion and solidarity as a first step to kind of take down your defense mechanism. So these type of things I think are critical and also worth uh, um, efforts on the both sides as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to it, there are implications for U.S. Defense programs. There's something we call Replicator, which is really building up capacity capability in the Indo-Pacific region. And my view there generally is we can invest a lot in that capacity buildup, but if those programs are not cyber resilient, then they can be rendered inert relatively quickly, and any support that those programs may bring could potentially be at risk without having full cyber defense. So just as Taiwan critical infrastructure and all the programs you've outlined that could be done, I think ensuring that any other support the U.S. brings is also cyber resilient. And so if we're investing in drones and undersea, underwater drones and the like, if they're taken out with a cyber attack, then that investment is wasted. So with that said, I also agree with you, kind of extending this to some of the traditional partners, South Korea, Japan, and then others, that may face similar issues down the road. So Singapore, Indonesia, even India and Australia, if everybody has an interest, just as you laid out up front in what happens in Taiwan. And so a coordination with the broader set of interested parties, I think is also important. So Replicator and other partners, of course, I think need to be brought into the programs, but obviously addressing cyber defenses for Taiwan is one of those primary things to get done. And with that said, a final question, and then we'll see from Olivia if there's questions from the audience. But what strategies can governments employ to enhance cooperation? Shifting gears a little bit to the private sector and civilians, but how can we enhance cooperation between public and private sectors in addressing cyber threats?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think probably the first priority is to initiate sector-specific information sharing and analysis centers. So I mentioned about attack on critical infrastructure, public health portal, or even industrial cyber espionage. Governments can encourage establishments of ISACs for various sectors such as energy, finance, healthcare, and telecom. And these centers serve as hubs for sharing industry-specific cyber threats and best practices and forging collaboration within and across sectors. And this need to be a joint operation by the US and Taiwan. And with a setup like this, a real-time threat intelligence sharing can also be conducted amongst our allies. And secondly, we need to develop some sort of automated indicator sharing program with the US. And that would allow for a rapid exchange of threat data between public and private entities. As I shared, the attack is not just on public portal, it's actually target even more so on the private sectors. So enhancing response times to cyber incidents are critical. We often run into difficulties when a company in semiconductor companies in Science Park is under attack, and then refuse to reveal the details or deals with the attackers individually, and that becomes an issue when there is no regulation binding to ask them to cooperate. So this type of things I think need to be in place. Secondly, formalizing public and private partnership PPPs for cyber security, and this could be a national level organizations working with private sector companies, such as Joe, your company would be a great, a fantastic partner for Taiwan to work with, and to constantly seek feedback from joint task force could basically help government to understand better the level of the threat and also the response time that it's needed. And thirdly, probably perhaps is a high-level collaborative working groups between public and private sector. So industry-specific working groups are very important to address unique and specific cybersecurity challenges, and also develop sector-specific standards, articles, and response plans. And then both governments and as well as private sector should incentivize participation with the private sector as well. So this we could probably increase the funding for private sector to work with the government, and also adopting and promote standardized frameworks that could be shared by US and Taiwan. And lastly, I think one critical component, and I'm a big advocate for this, is to set up a joint cybersecurity workforce development programs. It's basically government collaborate with private sector companies to develop training companies and certifications for cybersecurity professionals, and also set up the so-called talent exchange programs. Through this type of exchange, this can foster cross-sector understanding and improves collaboration on cyber crises, as well as innovation and R&D collaborations. And again, public awareness is probably everything. More support with the small and medium-sized enterprises are critically important. It's everyone's business. Cyber is everyone's business. It's not just the government's business. And so I'm just so happy that, Joe, you mentioned the collaboration with the private sector, and certainly that has been an issue even with Taiwan, that when our companies are under attack, we choose not to review it for the sake of not reviewing too much weaknesses. But I feel this is a time that private sector and public sector should work together to develop a comprehensive program.
Well, I appreciate all the comments and the discussion today, Jason, and certainly from the RunSafe perspective, building on your point, our goal is to protect critical infrastructure, and we realize and take very seriously at RunSafe the importance of protecting critical infrastructure as it pertains to national security and all of these issues we discussed today. So certainly appreciate the collaboration with you and the discussion today. We'll see if anybody else has questions. So over to you, Olivia. But thank you very much, Jason, for joining us thus far. And we'll see if we have one or two questions.
Great. I will emphasize that. Thank you both, Joe and Jason, for this enlightening conversation. We will open up for Q&A. If you haven't already submitted a question, please feel free to add one into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and answer a few of those. All right, let's see here. Okay, Joe, here's a good one for you. Can you elaborate a little bit on some specific technologies or approaches that have proven effective in disrupting hacker economics, particularly around the context of critical infrastructure protection?
Absolutely. Certainly when you think about vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure, you think that you don't really have enough time to rewrite software, and you need to find ways to add in security protections. And so I do believe that when China is pre-positioned in critical infrastructure and they're targeting vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure, that the kind of technology that RunSafe employs, the software memory protection, can be deployed without rewriting software. And the advantage of that from the economics perspective, as the question raises, Olivia, is that there's a lot of time spent that nation states might take to pre-position an exploit inside infrastructure, if you can suddenly eliminate the attack vector itself and reduce the attack vector without rewriting any software, but just simply implementing, certain protections, then that's one really good example. And that's what RunSafe tries to do, is to implement the software memory protection without rewriting software to render those kinds of payloads inert in general.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Joe. Let's see here. Jason, here's a good one for you. Can you discuss any recent policy initiatives or legislative efforts in Taiwan, specifically aimed at strengthening national cybersecurity?
Yeah, when I was in the legislature in 2019, I've sponsored and the legislature passed the Cybersecurity Management Act, which provides the governing law of each government agency and departments to strengthen its cyber capabilities. And since then, each government department has a CIO, or I should say Chief Cyber Officer. For example, Ministry of Education has one, Ministry of Energy has one, Ministry of Environment has one, and they all collaborate under the auspices of this act and to develop a strong cyber enhancement of cyber capabilities. And since then, we have the ambition to build Taiwan as the regional cyber hub by developing our cyber capabilities, our workforce, our industry engagement, and to really share what we know. So the real-time threat data sharing, and as well as the joint exercise, or even just by providing the data, is highly valuable to US and our allies. So imagine CISA, the US cybersecurity agency, to take the 30 million attacks on daily basis and analyze those, and even develop and signaling or even preventive measures from those attacks. It will be highly valuable to our allies, and also this is not restricted to Taiwan only. Most of the attacks are operated or launched from a third country, such as Cambodia or Eastern Europe or other South America countries. So we do stand on a good sharing value, and which we would love to provide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason, for that insight and for answering that question. Looks like we are at about the end of our time today, so huge thank you to everyone who was able to attend. I hope you really enjoyed our discussion on critical cyber and resilience issues facing Taiwan today. I know I did. I got a lot out of it. Thanks again, Joe and Jason, for joining as our guests today. For the audience, please be sure to check out our events page on the website for any upcoming webinars. Thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.